Looking for magic cards? At flipsidegaming.com you can now use the promo code LVD to get a 10% discount on orders over $10 while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another Magic Arena gameplay video. Today we're taking a look at Izzet Viceroy, a blue-red control deck featuring the full 4 copies of Niv-Mizzet, 6 mana for a 5/5 flyer that cannot be countered, and whenever you draw a card, Niv-Mizzet deals 1 damage to any target, and whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you get to draw a card, which also triggers the first clause, letting us deal 1 damage to any target. So once Niv-Mizzet enters the battlefield, he very quickly takes over the game, letting us draw tons of extra cards and mowing down every opposing creature. So the goal of the deck is to get Niv-Mizzet in play as soon as possible and then take over the game from there, which is usually not too difficult. So we've got a few ways to help us ramp into Niv-Mizzet. One of those is Treasure Map, a 2-mana artifact where we can pay 1 mana and tap it to let us scry 1, giving us a bit of card selection. And then we also put a counter on Treasure Map. After putting the 3rd counter on Treasure Map, it transforms into Treasure Cove, and we also get 3 treasure tokens, which are colorless artifact tokens that we can sacrifice to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. And Treasure Cove is a land that taps to add 1 colorless to our mana pool, and we can also tap it and sacrifice one of those treasures to draw a card. And of course, drawing a card is very synergistic with a Niv-Mizzet in play, since that lets us deal 1 damage to any target. And of course, we can also sacrifice the treasures to help us make more mana to potentially cast a Niv-Mizzet a turn ahead of schedule, but just the card advantage the Treasure Map provides is also very valuable. And then the other way we have to ramp into Niv-Mizzet is using Sarkhan Fireblood, 3 mana Planeswalker, starts at 3 loyalty. The +1 ability lets us discard a card, and if we do, we get to draw a card, which is also quite synergistic with Niv-Mizzet, since we might have multiple copies of Niv-Mizzet stuck in our hand that are legendary, and we can only have 1 in play anyway. So Sarkhan is a nice way to discard additional copies of Niv-Mizzet, and with a Niv-Mizzet in play, also lets us trigger the first clause, letting us deal 1 damage to any target. But the important part is the second ability on Sarkhan, letting us +1 to add 2 mana in any combination of colors, and we can spend that mana to cast dragon spells, and conveniently Niv-Mizzet is a dragon, so we could cast a turn 4 Niv-Mizzet after casting a turn 3 Sarkhan, which is quite powerful. And then Sarkhan also works his way up to an ultimate at -7, creating 4 5/5 red dragon creature tokens with flying, which can also take over the game. So Sarkhan's pretty good in our deck, where we can protect him with plenty of removal spells and counter spells. So let's take a look at the rest of the deck. At 1 mana we've got 4 copies of Opt as a cheap cantrip, letting us scry 1 and draw a card. Great synergy with Niv-Mizzet, since not only does it trigger the second clause by casting an instant or sorcery, but it also triggers the first clause twice, once from the extra card draw, and then once from drawing a card from Opt itself. Then we've got 2 copies of Shock as a cheap burn spell, and all the burn spells in the deck synergize very nicely with Niv-Mizzet, since with the 1 extra damage we get to deal, we could potentially take out a larger creature. Then we've got 2 copies of Essence Scatter, letting us counter a creature spell. 2 copies of Lava Coil at sorcery speed, letting us deal 4 damage and exiling a creature, so great against any recursive threats. Then we've got 4 copies of Lightning Strike, dealing 3 damage to any target at instant speed, so can take out planeswalkers, take out creatures, but can also go to the face in the late game to try and close out the game. And of course, great synergy with all the counter spells, since we get to keep open mana. If our opponent plays something into a counter spell, we can counter it, otherwise we still have our instant speed removal at the ready. Then we've got our 4 treasure maps, which is our main source of card advantage besides Niv-Mizzet. We've got 2 Fiery Cannonades as a must-have sweeper effect against all the go-wide creature decks, dealing 2 damage to each non-pirate creature. Then we've got 2 copies of Sarkhan, of course. Then we've got the full 4 copies of Ionize as our counterspell of choice, countering a spell and dealing 2 damage to that spell's controller. So we're playing Ionize over Sinister Sabotage, mainly because it's a bit easier on the mana base, since if you look at the mana base, we only have 15 blue sources, which is not perfect for casting a double blue spell on turn 3 every time. So our mana base is slightly skewed towards red to help us cast Sarkhan on turn 3 more reliably, which is why Ionize makes more sense as our 3 mana counterspell here, even though Surveil 1 would be more useful than dealing 2 damage most of the time. Then we've got 2 copies of Crackling Drake as another win condition, and of course great in this deck where we have all these instants and sorceries, and also replaces itself, so even has a bit of synergy with Niv-Mizzet where we get to draw a card and deal 1 damage. We've got 1 copy of Ral, which can also be an extra source of card advantage, and can also be used as a repeatable removal spell, and of course if you ever get to the ultimate, you also very quickly take over the game. Then our full 4 copies of Niv-Mizzet, And then last but not least, we've got 2 copies of Expansion Explosion, and both halves of the card are very useful here. Expansion can copy an instant or sorcery spell with convert mana cost 4 or less, so we could even copy our own burn spells to maybe take out a larger creature, or take out a second creature. We could copy opposing burn spells as well, could copy opposing counter spells to counter their counter spell with their own counter spell using expansion, so a very versatile card. And then Explosion, X, double blue and double red to deal X damage to any targets, and target player draws X cards, so also plays pretty nicely with Treasure Map, providing extra mana sources with Treasure Cove and the treasures. And then our mana base, 7 islands, 10 mountains, 4 steam vents, which we can pay 2 life for to have it enter a battlefield untapped, and 4 copies of Sulfur Falls, which comes into play untapped if we control an island or a mountain. And then we also have some sideboard cards, even though we're going to play best of 1 here just to give you some ideas. Dive Down as a nice cheap way to protect Niv-Mizzet from opposing removal spells. We've got Disdainful Stroke as a catch-all counterspell for cards with converted mana cost 4 or greater. Negate against non-creature spells. Additional Fiery Cannonades against the go-wide aggro decks. Beacon Bolt can also be a nice repeatable removal spell against the larger creatures. We've got Chemist's Insight in the control matchups to draw even more cards. Then Star of Extinction can be great against any mid-range deck relying on lots of creatures and planeswalkers. And then we have an Entrancing Melody, which we can use for 2 mana to steal an opposing token, like a Knight token from Hystra Benalia, which has converted mana cost of 0, or for 4 mana we can use it to steal Adanto Vanguard, which can be problematic as all the removal in our deck is damage-based and they can just make it indestructible. But of course, once we get Niv-Mizzet down, he can easily block Adanto Vanguard or just shoot it down, and the opponent won't be able to pay for life repeatedly. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand's okay. Both Expansion and Niv-Mizzet can be a little bit clunky, but of course, Expansion, Explosion, we can always just play for 2 mana potentially. So we'll keep, and just hope to draw into some more lands. We're playing 25 lands, plus of course a few cantrips and treasure maps to make sure we hit our land drops. Opponent on green-black. We also have the potential play of Fiery Cannonade and then copy it with Expansion for 2 mana, so 5 mana, deal 4 damage to all non-pirates. Seeker Squaresher. So looks like Golgari midrange, which can be a bit of a rough matchup since Ravenous Chupacabra answers Niv-Mizzet without drawing us any extra cards, so this is where a Dive Down would be very useful. But we'll see. For now we'll just say go, and then keep up Fiery Cannonade to maybe take out some creatures. It's gonna be a Jade Light Ranger, so I think in response to the Explore trigger, we'll Fiery Cannonade on the off chance that the Ranger would become a 4/3 creature. Llanowar Elves, they're gonna keep on top, alright. And another Fiery Cannonade, which we can use to maybe take out Llanowar Elves. I think we're fine using the Cannonade here. We could also Lightning Strike. Opponent might be working their way up towards a Carnage Tyrant, which could be a scary card here if we don't get Niv-Mizzet down quickly. So I think we do Cannonade, keep the Lightning Strikes as potential burn spells to go face after we play Niv-Mizzet to potentially try and race a Carnage Tyrant, which is definitely feasible. Alright, Acid Scatter, so sadly didn't hit our land drop here. So we will be 1 turn behind at least. And Vraska we can't counter. We can kill her with some burn spells, but for now Vraska can stay in play. Ooh, our opponent forgot to plus Vraska here. They could have just plus 2'd without sacrificing anything. Draw another Niv-Mizzet. Alright, so this isn't going great, but I guess if our opponent doesn't know they don't have to sacrifice anything to plus Vraska, we're not in such a bad spot. Merfolk Branchwalker I think will allow... Want to keep Acid Scatter for maybe the Jade Light Ranger or some other value creature like Golgari Finebrokers. Find Finality, they'll keep on top. And yeah, opponent doesn't seem to realize how Vraska works. Let's just Lightning Strike the Branchwalker, I think. Could also just take out Vraska, but Vraska doesn't really bother us at the moment. Alright, so we need 1 more land for Niv-Mizzet. Opponent does have land 6, hoping to dodge a Carnage Tyrant here. If they want to cast Find, getting back some creatures, that's okay. We could copy it with Expansion, but there's no creatures we can get back ourselves. They're gonna start with a Seeker Squire. Jade Light Ranger on top. And the Llanowar Elves, that's fine. Alright. Probably gonna Lightning Strike the Seeker Squire. We could also Lightning Strike copy it with Expansion. Could also do nothing, since it's not like a Seeker Squire is really bothering us. So I think we'll untap for now. Lava Coil. Alright, I guess we'll use a Lava Coil. And then keep up Assa Scatter for the Jade Light Ranger. If they Chupacabra the first Niv-Mizzet, we have a second one, and hopefully the second one sticks around. They could also use the Memorial here to get back Jade Light Ranger. Instead it's going to be Golgari Findbroker. Alright, it's too bad. So gets back the Jade Light Ranger. So some nice 2-for-1s, but opponent's only got one remaining card in hand that we don't know about. They're finally going to start plussing Vraska to sack some lands. And we fall to 19. And treasure map. Alright. So we can scry to maybe help us find the land we're looking for. So yeah, you can imagine how a turn 6 Niv-Mizzet would have wrecked our opponent by now. Wild Growth Walker. Still gonna be pretty relevant here. But they're gonna play the Jade Light anyway. Alright. So they've got a 4-3 Jade Light. And they're gonna hit us for 4. So I think we're gonna use Treasure Map. Opponent's gonna plus with Vraska. Yeah, now we won't be able to ignore Vraska for much longer. They could have also minus to destroy the treasure map for what it's worth. Plays Wild Growth Walker. They could have sequenced things a bit better and then gotten some +1/+1 counters on the Wild Growth Walker thanks to the Explorer. But I'm not gonna complain. So now we can Lightning Strike, probably the Ranger. And then scry one with the treasure map. And Mountain on top is fine. So we'll untap, draw, play Niv-Mizzet, hope the remaining card in their hand is not a Chupacabra or another answer to Niv-Mizzet. If it is, we'll be taking quite a bit of damage here, and then Vraska Ultimate becomes an issue. They play lands, and what's it gonna be? Assassin's Trophy. Alright, it's not as bad as it could have been. So we can take out the Llanowar Elves. And we get to search up a land. We'll get an island. So next turn we can go Niv-Mizzet plus Opt, and we still get to scry with our treasure map here. Opponent's gonna minus to take out the treasure map. We'll use it one last time here to get a scry. And bottomless steam vents. Alright, now Vraska Ultimate's no longer a concern. And we've got Niv-Mizzet plus Opt incoming. So let's draw. Shock is good too. So let's play Niv. Alright, so this Shock can essentially deal 3 damage to something. And Opt is dealing 2 damage essentially. But we can let our opponent untap first. What do they have in the graveyard? They can get back a Jade Light Ranger, that's acceptable. We might want to shock the Wild Growth Walker before it accumulates any +1/+1 counters. Oof. Opponent with a top-decked Vraska's Contempt. That's rough. So we probably want to Opt here instead of shocking, which means we deal 1 damage to the Wild Growth Walker. Then we'll Opt. Find another shock. And then bottom the Sulfur Falls. And we need yet another Niv-Mizzet here, and there we go. Alright. So our opponent back up to 24. They can put us to 2 life here. But then we get to play Niv-Mizzet and double shock, which can deal a total of 6 damage. And they do manage to play Jade Light Ranger here. Finds 2 lands, alright. Well, if we can dodge another top decked removal spell, I think we'll be okay. So make sure to keep up double red. And especially with double expansion explosion, we'll be able to draw tons of cards, and explosion with Niv-Mizzet in play can deal a ton of damage, so we'll say go. Kind of incentivize our opponent to maybe attack with all their creatures and walk into our double shock. So they've got a 1 unknown card, a Vraska that they can use to draw 1 more card, and hopefully no answer for Niv-Mizzet here. A Wild Growth Walker is acceptable. And a Jade Light Ranger, so... Alright, now we probably want to take out a Wild Growth Walker before it gets any additional counters, and then a second shock we can use to take out 2 more creatures, so we'll be fine. And our opponent might still attack with everyone, hoping to kill us, if they think we made a mistake. They're gonna put Llanowar Elves in the graveyard and then draw land. Alright, let's see if they go for it. They do, alright, perfect. So they walked into our trap. Get to block the Find Broker. Wouldn't good game us quite yet here. Shock the Branchwalker, ping the Jade Light Ranger. And all of a sudden, Niv-Mizzet reigns supreme here. Alright, so where do we deal the damage? I guess do the Jade Light Ranger for now. And let's cast a giant explosion here. I think we'll lead with an opt first. Could also copy the opt a few times with expansion, but that doesn't seem as good here. Take out the Ranger. Draw a card. Another Niv-Mizzet as insurance, why not? And we'll deal 1 damage to our opponents. And then I think we'll just explosion main phase here. For 4. And then deal 4 damage to Vraska. Draw 4 cards. So that's 5 damage to Vraska. And got a few more Niv-Mizzet triggers here. And our opponent scoops it up. Alright, so they've seen enough. Our opponent definitely made a few errors, not realizing they could +2 Vraska without having to sacrifice anything. And the sequencing with some of the Wild Growth Walkers could have been a bit better. But we could definitely see the power of Niv-Mizzet, even though he arrived a bit late as we missed a few land drops. Once Niv-Mizzet resolved and we got to untap with him, he did some dirty things. So on to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, and how about this one? I mean, it does have potential. 2 lands is not exactly where we want to be, but if we get to our 3rd land for Sarkhan, he can potentially loot us into extra lands. We've got some cheap removal in Lava Coil. So I think this hand has enough potential that we keep it. Sadly, Crackling Drake not a dragon, so we can't actually ramp into it with our Sarkhan here. But just helping us find more lands is good enough. And we're up against an opposing blue-red deck, alright. So hopefully our 3rd land arrives soon. We're playing 25 lands. We've got 4 opts and 4 treasure maps as well to help us find more lands. Alright, that's not one of them. So we'll pass a turn. And their opponent with an opt, which I'll gladly steal with expansion here. So we get to maybe find a land. Alright, glad we did, otherwise we were going to draw an opt instead. And now a roll as well. So we're not getting lucky with finding our 3rd land here. Alright, there we go, just in time. Get to play our Sarkhan. And what appears to be a Grixis control deck. Shock and Lava Coil are not going to be the most valuable cards. I could see discarding one of those two. And I think I'll go with Shock. You never know, they could have some Drakes in there or some other creature that dies to Lava Coil. Finds an Opt. And a Nicol Bolas. Alright, so Lava Coil also a good answer here. So what do we discard? I could see discarding Expansion Explosion. Could see discarding Crackling Drake. I think we'll get rid of Expansion. So we could opt first to get a bit more info on what to discard with Sarkhan, since we really do want to find a land. Yeah, I think we'll start there. Treasure map. Don't think that's quite good enough. I would much prefer just an untapped land. Alright, find an Ionize, so I think we'll discard one of those counter spells. Could also discard a Lightning Strike, I guess, since your opponent's unlikely to have many creatures that die to a Lightning Strike. Yeah, I could see that. Alright, we did find a mountain at least. Now we'll Lava Coil Nicol Bolas. Hope they don't have a second one, but for now we get to play our mountain. And then next turn we might be able to keep up a counterspell. If they have an Eldest Reborn here, we kind of get wrecked, but it doesn't appear to be the case. So now we could also play a Ral. Opponent might be holding up a counterspell. I think I prefer just keeping up Ionize and working our way up towards Ultimate, which means we have to discard something. I could see discarding Crackling Drake, as we're missing double blue at the moment. And we don't really want to be tapping out for a Crackling Drake anytime soon. Yeah, it's probably fine. And even though a mountain's not ideal since it's not a blue source for Niv-Mizzet, we would still have Sarkhan in play to help us make double blue, and there we go, perfect. And just hitting our land drop here is good enough. Since if we can get to a point where we can cast Niv-Mizzet and then protect him with Ionize, we'll be in even better shape. So land next turn would get us pretty close, but not quite. We would have a total of 8 mana. Oof, opponent has their own Niv-Mizzet. Yep. So let's see here. How many instants and sorceries do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah. Luckily, Ral will be able to kill Niv-Mizzet without inflicting too much damage. I think we do still want to loot with Sarkhan, discarding a Niv-Mizzet, because if our opponent does find an answer for Sarkhan like a Vraska's Contempt, we don't have any blue mana to cast a Niv-Mizzet in the first place, so keeping both might be a little bit greedy, even though keeping the second one could be insurance against removal. Find a mountain instead. Don't even know if we want to play that one, but of course in the scenario where we draw a land next turn, we could make 2 mana with Sarkhan, which would let us cast Niv-Mizzet and then still keep up Ionize. So I think it's still worth it to play the land here, but if they kill Sarkhan, we could be in trouble. Could also just ultimate Sarkhan next turn, which is a thing. Get to make some dragon tokens. Opponent's casting Discovery to find an answer here, presumably. And our opponent just scoops it up, so they can beat the Sarkhan ultimates, and now we have 2 active planeswalkers. Sarkhan lets us cast Niv-Mizzet, Ral finds more cards to cast alongside Niv-Mizzet, and yeah, that's game, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and this hand's not great. 5 lands, Shock and Lightning Strike's not really gonna cut it for the most part, unless we draw Niv-Mizzet right away. I think we'll try and go to 6 here. Alright, a 1-lander, but we have a treasure map, and then Shock and Lightning Strike as cheap interaction. On the draw, I think we can afford to keep this one, and land on top is fine here. So we get to play turn 2 treasure map, which helps us find more lands for our subsequent plays. Opponent on Jeskai with their own treasure map. Alright, so we might see opposing Niv-Mizzets here, so it's going to be a true mirror match. Opponent says go. We'll do the same. Keeping up Ionize. So the fact that they played a tapped Sacred Foundry kind of implies that they don't have a 3-mana counterspell in hand. They could have still had an Essence Scatter, but then he would probably still play the Sacred Foundry untapped so you can scry with the treasure map. So we suspect our opponent doesn't have any counterspells in hand, which means that Crackling Drake is more likely to resolve here, which is good. So let's scry with our treasure map. So we will not put a stop on upkeep with the treasure map since we're gonna just play Crackling Drake here. Steam Vents is an okay draw since we do want to hit our land drops. So I think we'll keep it. Could also see bottoming since whatever's not a Niv-Mizzet is not a perfect draw here, but we will need 6 lands to cast Niv-Mizzet in the first place. So I think we'll keep it on top. But any future lands we might bottom. Alright, let's play Crackling Drake, which I suspect resolves here, but we'll see. Interesting, Ionize. So they must have drawn Ionize for the turn, otherwise playing the Sacred Foundry tapped is pretty risky. Probably just want to play a tapped Steam Vent so we can Ionize plus scry with the treasure map. Could have also scried with the treasure map on upkeep, but I forgot to put a stop here. Which is one of the annoying things right now, that you have to put the stop on upkeep every time. And let's just play tap Steam Vents. So we do have an Ionize to counter Teferi potentially, which is important, but if our opponent jams their own Niv-Mizzet here, we're going to be in a bit of trouble, since we don't really want to shock plus lightning strike it. Alright, Teferi, be gone.
Want me to phase you out of time?
And we'll scry with our treasure map. Not a treasure map, it's tempting. It's not a Niv-Mizzet, but still pretty good here. Yeah, we'll keep it on top. Draw, then we can flip our first treasure map. And there's Niv-Mizzet, perfect. So we'll keep that on top. Play another treasure map. And pass the turn. So we don't need to scry on upkeep with the second treasure map here since we are fine drawing Niv-Mizzet. The only thing we don't have is a counterspell to protect him. So opponent flips their treasure map. Let's see if they have their own Niv-Mizzet. They do. Alright. So opponent does have 2 mana up. If they have a dive down, then going lightning strike plus shock would be quite painful, so I prefer playing our own Niv-Mizzet first before we do anything else. I will still scry just to put a counter on the treasure map here, even though we're happy keeping Niv-Mizzet on top. Alright, it's gonna be a Niv-Mizzet battle. So let's play our own. We've got a few tools here at our disposal. We also have the option of sacking a treasure token to deal 1 damage to Niv-Mizzet essentially. So we'll cast a lightning strike, targeting Niv-Mizzet. Let's see where they point to 1 damage. Alright, to our face, that's good. Means they don't have their own lightning strike. Deal 1 to Niv-Mizzet, 3 more. But we actually have an interesting scenario here where we can deal 1 more damage to Niv before the dive down resolves, and then another shock can take out Niv-Mizzet. So opponent draws from Niv, we draw from Niv, we deal 1 to their Niv-Mizzet, and then we can shock before the dive down resolves. Hope they don't have a second dive down here, essentially. Alright, so very interesting Niv-Mizzet battle here. But they do get to draw some cards here as well from our spells we cast with our opponent's Niv-Mizzet in play. Alright, please no second dive down. Alright, that works. Niv-Mizzet down, and Alright, we still have our Niv-Mizzet in play, plus we can also scry with our treasure map. I guess we also get to play a land here. That was a pretty complicated sequence of events, but I think we're okay here, unless they can just deal with Niv-Mizzet on the cheap. The ferry, sadly, we can't counter. So they could minus targeting Niv-Mizzet here.
If you show remorse, I'll show restraint.
So we want to scry after Niv-Mizzet goes into our deck, so we get closer to replaying Niv-Mizzet as soon as possible here. And a Rekindling Phoenix, that's okay. Alright, so we get to scry end of turn, bottom the lands, and upkeep we can scry again. And bottom the treasure map, and then we draw Niv-Mizzet, which seems pretty good here. I think we just play Niv-Mizzet and don't play Sarkhan here. We can keep up Ionize, or we can sack a treasure right now to deal 1 damage to Teferi to finish it off. That's actually probably worth it here. So we'll be shields down on Niv-Mizzet, but we get to finish off Teferi, which is pretty important. Alright, and we actually drew the land, so we can still keep up Ionize. And Teferi will attempt to counter. If they counter back, that's okay. We'll draw some cards with Niv-Mizzet and probably find an answer. Alright, they do counter back. And find a Lava Coil, which answers a Phoenix. So Teferi's gonna minus on Niv-Mizzet again, probably. And then it's gonna be our Sarkhan versus Teferi on 1 loyalty.
I won't hide from the world any longer. Time is much more malleable than people think.
Alright, we'll see what happens. Draw land, so not ideal here. So we'll Sarkhan first. Discarding a land.
You will feel the lick of I know what I'm doing.
Draw land. Alright, so next turn we're drawing Niv-Mizzet. We'll deal with the Phoenix right now. And I think we can afford to play 1 land. Definitely want to keep a land in hand for Sarkhan. But I think we still want extra mana in play. Alright, so our opponent gets 1 turn where they get to untap with the ferry. Hopefully we don't see more Niv-Mizzets here. Treasure map instead. So we wanna play Niv-Mizzet first before we plus Sarkhan, since we get to deal 1 damage. Hopefully draw into a spell. So we can finish off the ferry. Alright, another Sarkhan. So if we Sarkhan again, we don't have anything left in our hand to discard to Sarkhan's +1 ability, so I don't think it's worth playing here, since we would also be just reducing the loyalty, so definitely not worth it. Had we kept an additional land in hand, we might have been able to Sarkhan again and then discard to finish off the ferry right now. So yeah, tiny decisions can definitely matter. Opponent tops the card with a treasure map, which is not a good sign.
Hold that thought.
So we'll be able to finish off the ferry here, most likely.
Time for plan B, as soon as I think of one.
I think we discard the Cannonade, even though it's a spell for Niv-Mizzet. Dealing 2 damage to Niv-Mizzet could be kind of awkward if our opponent has their own copy of Lightning Strike, or maybe some other burn spell. Add instant speed here. So I think we just plus Sarkhan, discard Fiery Cannonade. Sarkhan's getting close to ultimating as well. And we get to finish off the ferry. Yeah, I think that's okay. Alright, Lava Coil, probably an upgrade. In case they have more copies of Rekindling Phoenix.
Hey, that was uncalled for.
And we'll attack with Niv-Mizzet. Hope they don't have a Seal Away or Cellular Wreckage here. Alright, they do have a Cellular Wreckage, sadly. And I guess we will cast a Lightning Strike here just to deal some additional damage. And draw an extra card. Ooh, perfect. Ionize. That was quite a draw. Opponent could easily have their own counterspell, but every counterspell with Niv-Mizzet still in play is gonna give us extra cards. So this was also a reason to potentially keep the Fiery Cannonade in hand, so we could potentially draw one extra card, give us an extra shot at drawing into an Ionize. So opponent down to 11. We can tap some of our treasure coves here. Alright, see if they have a counterspell. Opponent down to 10. Ionize resolves, so Niv-Mizzet still in play. And they're gonna take 5 from Niv-Mizzet. Sweet. So we're pretty close to just killing them. Now I think we'll keep lands in hand. We could potentially put our opponent to 1 if we play Sarkhan, discard, deal 1 with Niv-Mizzet, Lava Coil, or Niv-Mizzet to deal 1. Doesn't seem necessary here. So I'm just gonna let them untap. So they get to transform the treasure map next turn and draw a card with the treasure cove that's already in play. But finding 3 damage is not going to be too difficult here. Alright, what do they find? A land into their own Niv-Mizzet, alright. They're going to sack with treasure cove, dealing 1 damage to our face. And our opponent scoops it up, since they would be dead to our draw step, dealing 1 damage, Sarkhan dealing 1 damage, and then any additional card draw or no-creature spell we play triggering Niv-Mizzet would finish them off. Alright, I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for being part of the channel, and you can become a patron yourself today and decide the topic of future videos over at patreon.com/LegenVD.